Shall we begin with a little meditation? Today we're going to meditate on identifying the object of negation. Do you remember what that means? You girls over there don't know what that means, but maybe your mom does. Okay, identifying or recognizing the object of negation in the context of meditation on emptiness, right? Because Rinpoche has begun the section on special insight. So what we have, actually there are two, as was explained, but maybe it wasn't so clear, there are two objects of negation. One is the appearance of the I as being truly existent. Remember Rinpoche mentioned how that appearance of the I can arise if someone praises you or criticizes you, especially. That's one of the objects of negation. Another object of negation is the ignorance that's believing that the factor of the mind, the mental factor which perceives that in the wrong way and thinks it is true, that's true, that I grasps to it as true. So one of the objects of negation is something that doesn't exist. That is to say, there is the appearance of the I. Does that exist? Appearance of the truly existent I? What do you think? I forgot your name. Shirley. What do you think? Does the truly existent I appear? Or does it not appear? Is there no existence of the appearance of the I? No, it does appear. Just like a mirage appears, or a reflection in a mirror appears. But what is not true is what it refers to. What we think it means, that it refers to some truly existent I. There's the appearance of the I. That's not the object of negation, the appearance of the I. It's what we're conceiving of, what we're imagining that I to be. That is to be negated, right? And the other object of negation is something that does exist, that is the ignorance that's grasping to that I. Frank, you know this because we talked in mental factors, mind and mental factors, which some of you know this from other classes, right? So let's begin our meditation.
Yeah, it's not the object of negation, it's what we think it is that is.
Right. Well, is the object of, is the appearance of the I, in one sense, the appearance of a truly existent I is a third kind of object of negation, but only in the sense that it's to be ultimately eliminated from the mind in the stage of Buddhahood. But even people who've realized emptiness directly, in post-meditation, there still is the appearance of the I. There's the appearance of true existence, as Rinpoche said. So that's not the main object that's being negated here. The main object that's being negated is the truly existent I that we believe when we see that appearance of a truly existent I, we think that's what it is. Like, for instance, when you see a mirage, what do people think it is? Water. So there is a difference. Do you see what I'm saying? There is the appearance of the mirage. You can't say there is no mirage. No, there's a mirage. But there's no water that the mind conceives of it to be. That's as though there's water behind the mirage or where the mirage is. Also, two people can see the same mirage. One of them who's skilled will not grasp at that as being water. So from the subject side, there you can have eliminated the grasping at that. That would be like in the mind stream of a being, an Arya being who's realized selflessness or emptiness. Okay, so now people have settled down. Is Rosa set down yet? Where's Rosa? Okay, Rosa's comfortable. Okay, Keith's here. So let's try to meditate now, first of all. Just calm your mind, first of all, by watching your breathing. So within a state, a calm state of mind that has faith that Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha can protect us from this ignorance, grasping to the I, can help us to benefit sentient beings. So that, in a sense, the causes of refuge. And with a sense that I'm going to meditate on the first step in meditation on emptiness so that I can become less needy, less a problem to myself and others, less attached, less angry. I'm going to try to recognize the object of negation. Now imagine, as you're sitting comfortably, imagine a situation recently or in the past, something that's dynamic. You have, at some time or other, been accused of something unjustly. You feel unjustly. Or you've been praised. Maybe this very strong feeling of desire, say in the case of romantic love or feelings of responsibility. Also, the sense of I may be very apparent. First of all, just watch that I, thinking of the situation that you've been criticized or praised, or you've felt you were in love or something like that. The I that we're trying to identify here is very subtle, the subtlemost object, not just the gross sense of I, as though somehow similar to your body or identical with your feelings or your mind. But a sense of I that is not merely labeled onto your body and mind. Not just the name Rosa, not just the name Keith, Roberto, whatever. When you compare in your own mind, if you were to say, I am just a name, the only way that I exist, the Buddha explained, is as an imputation, a name given to this combination of 5 aggregates. Just that conceptual or verbal designation, that's the only kind of conventional existence I have. Now compare that, you can imagine, with how the I seems to be appearing. It seems to be something quite different than just a name. Here you're trying to utilize the power of your mind, your ability to concentrate, which you would enhance at other times. Here you're trying to first recognize the object of negation and focus on it. First get a glimpse of it, then try to keep it in mind with mindfulness as we kept the image of Buddha in mind before. If you need to try to revivify the sense of I by thinking of some success or failure in your life, or the ego, the sense of ego, both the objective and subjective sense of ego seem to arise. Thinking, I made mistake, or I did well, I'm fantastic. This subtlemost sense of I is not something related to your body, or related to your mind. Although it always appears having perceived the body and mind first, because that's the basis of imputation of the I. Here you're not focusing on the body or mind, but just focusing on the sense of I. It's not a physical feeling as though in the middle of your chest, although that might be present when the I is very manifest. Just a mental apprehension of a soul, a self, that seems to be existing from its own side without need of being imputed by the mind. See if you can differentiate between the object that is conceived of here there's the appearance of the I, the object also be as though that appearance was referring to, and the subjective mind, the actual experience of the mind, how it is reacting to that appearance, that sense of I. Then relax your mind. Bring your attention back to the present. We'll spend another couple minutes doing that a little bit later in the class, in the discussion group. Any questions in what we were saying? It may not have been exactly clear because, just because of the need of yesterday Fabrizio translating Rinpoche's comments live and everything, maybe the terminology didn't come across all the time. When we talk about the object to be negated, we're talking about something that doesn't exist, mainly. We're talking about the object of negation is a truly existent self. That's the main object of negation. Rinpoche was using the terminology yesterday, the innate grasping. Do you know what that means? I don't know. What is your name? What is your name? Yeah, you? Derek. Eric or Derek? Eric. Do you know what that means? Innate grasping? No? Innate here, this means not just something that you kind of think up yourself of what I am. I am a guy. I'm a Chinese fellow. I am an engineer. Or I am a good son, or I am a father, or whatever, I am employed, or I'm unemployed, whatever. None of those kind of things. But innate sense of I is beyond all of those kinds of intellectual labels, the sense of I that is always there in the background, whatever realm we might be born in. Even ants and cows and hell beings and gods and beings in the various form and formless realms have a sense of I. Okay? So still we have to differentiate from the subject side and the object side. A lot of people coming late. It's good if you could. That was nice of you. Some of you waited outside when we were trying to meditate. Some of you just barged right in. I'm teasing, but you know who. Okay. Okay. Yes, Rosa.
What is the self, I?
Pardon me?
They give a definition of the self. The self, we use English, we talk about self or person,
Yes.
but I think it's self is point to the all sentient beings. It's not a person. Here, we translate the person means the human beings. Did he say anything about that?
He may not have, but what we're understanding here is that there is on a conventional level, which the highest philosophical school accepts, there is a Rosa. Rosa does exist conventionally, merely as the name or concept. If I think Rosa, that's the only Rosa that can be said to exist. If I look further and I want to say, well, what do you mean? Rosa is just a name. No, there's something Rosa. There's really there, Rosa. So I look maybe in the face, under the hair, the ears, I don't know, in the body, in the mind. We're looking within the parts of Rosa, the aggregates, or as Fabrizio said the other day, hips. Heaps. That's another translation of aggregates, right? Or of skandhas, the heps, the heaps. So there are different kinds of eyes. We need a little bit of study to be successful in meditation on emptiness, I think. This is what the great beings say. To really understand emptiness well, you need to have some ability to investigate these questions that the Buddha explained, these problems, and as the great meditators of the past have analyzed, there is there is a self that does exist, but that's not the self in question here. The self that we're talking about is the self that appears to be existent from its own side, not just the name labeled to Rosa, but there seems within Rosa's mind, within all of our minds, within Roberto's mind, within Linda's mind, there is a sense of I. You might label yourself Linda or Rosa or Roberto, or you might just say I. You know, I, John. Huh? Okay, but that's my answer. Okay, so what's your question?
Definition, the I is not talking about a human being. We talk about the beings in other realm. Is that true? I know.
The definition of the person can include any being, any sentient being. It doesn't have to be only human. Okay, your question is. Okay, I'll answer my imaginary question that you didn't ask, because I didn't understand your question. So no, it's my fault. It's my ignorance. So let's say in a sense, the definition of a person is a being designated to one of the five aggregates, or to the five aggregates, or in the formless realm to the four aggregates. That's the general definition of a person according to the highest philosophical school. A person does exist. A person is an impermanent phenomena because our parts, our aggregates, are changing, and so the person, the concept imputed upon them, designated to them, also is changing moment by moment. So we're impermanent. But there is a sense in our minds. Well, let's start off with the appearance, first of all. There is an appearance to our mind of a self that is not like that. This appearance occurs with everything, not just our own being as a person, but also exists with external phenomena, the wristwatch, the glasses, the house, varying, everything that we perceive an appearance as though it's existing, just like our self exists, from its own side. It's not as though in the finer view of things that phenomena only have an existence that we designate to them. That's the only kind of conventional existence they're said to have. But here we're talking about the self, first of all. So there is an appearance of the self, and immediately upon that appearance, the mind perceiving that appearance has a reaction to it. Our reaction, due to ignorance, is to perceive or grasp that, assent to that, as though it were true. Because we're used to it. You know, me, the big me, the I. You know, I want this, I want that. I'm angry, I'm happy. You've made me angry. We say all of these things, you know. The real you made the real I angry. So the Buddha said that this is the root of the problem. Not so much the appearance of the I. That is a problem too. But our reaction to that appearance. Our reaction to that appearance is to believe in it, to grasp to it. This is a kind of ignorance. It's a mental phenomenon, mental factor. Due to that, the presence of that kind of ignorance in our mind, all of the other delusions arise. We get angry, we have attachment, we're jealous, we're proud, we have doubt, everything else. You know, we hold grudges, we're lazy. All of our other problems arise from that, and we create negative karma as a result of those other kinds of mental states. All, if you go down to the root of things, because of this sense of I. When I say sense of I mean the subjective sense, grasping to that I, believing in it. To overcome that grasping, we have to develop a wisdom that has that sees it as it actually is, a counter-agent to that ignorance. If we see that the appearance of the I is actually empty of what we're usually associating with it, maybe that could give you a little flavor of what the word empty means here. That kind of wisdom starts to erode the ignorance. In fact, as the little flicker of wisdom begins to grow, the ignorance correspondingly decreases. That's grasping to the I. If I said to you, a mirage is empty of water, would that make sense linguistically? What do you think, Leo? Does that make sense? A mirage is empty of water?
Does, but from a Western perspective, I think it would mean something else. It would mean that maybe it was supposed to have water, you know.
But let's say if I was trying to explain to you, or you were trying to explain to me, because that's probably the case, if we're in the desert and I'm running after this mirage, or I'm running after some illusion that some magician has conjured up, or I'm running after a reflection in a mirror thinking it's something real, and you were saying, George, stop. That appearance is actually empty of what you're conceiving it to be. There's some appearance, but it's not what you think it is. So that's what we mean by emptiness here, that the object that appears, in this case, well, let's say, the actual object, it can be sophisticated. For those of you who've studied a little bit, I'll say it once, but leave it at that. There is a conventionally existent I, right? There is an appearance of that also. And as soon as there's the appearance of a conventionally existent I, the mere Linda imputed onto the aggregates, the mere Eric, as soon as we have that appearance, there is simultaneously with it the appearance of a truly existent Eric, a truly existent John, a truly existent Venerable. Okay, they're, as Rinpoche said yesterday, they're inseparable to our minds right now. Okay? So, within our mind, our conception, our conceptual mind, that's where the problem arises. It's not so much with our senses, it's with our conceptual mind. Our mind perceives that appearance, a mental appearance to our mental consciousness, and grasps at it as true, believes it, in other words, assents to it. That's what's meant by ego grasping. Have you heard of that term, ego grasping, or grasping at true existence? That means it's a subjective state of mind that's perceiving that appearance that seems to be not just an imputation, seems to really exist there by its own side, and believing that. So that was my answer to Rosa's question. Thank you so much. Okay, so John, now we have some questions. So now there's going to be a little more sense here now. John's going to ask a good question.
Phrase that Fabrizio was translating as simultaneously born, is that the same phrase that you translated as innate grasping? Or is that, or are they?
I think Lenke, I think that's probably what he was translating as simultaneously born. He's probably thinking of terminology from Tantra or something like that. It's here it's the innate sense of self-grasping. You could say, yeah, okay. This is the kind of this is the kind of ignorance or reaction of our mind that is naturally born from previous lives. You know, it's not something that is the product of our intellectual conceptualization this lifetime. Yeah. So someone else have something they wanted to pursue from what Rinpoche was saying. Now remember, there are the 4 points. I'll just quickly remind you. We're just on the first point now, the 4-point analysis, recognizing the object of negation. It's said, great yogis say that a person who is really intent on meditating on emptiness and realizing emptiness might spend months or a year or more concentrating on this, letting it become very vivid to their mind before refuting it. We don't refute it immediately at the beginning. You want to be able to identify it, like, as Rinpoche said yesterday, to identify the thief who's been stealing all of your silverware. Maybe you don't have silver. Maybe stealing your computer disks, or I don't know. What does he steal from you, Aaron? Small change or something. What is it? Stocks? Stocks. Carrie's case, it's stocks and bonds. Okay. Okay, so did you have a question back there? Yeah.
Understand the mind-only school a little bit. And so on this first point, would there be a difference between the way the mind-only school would view it versus the mind-only?
Yeah, I don't think mind-only school would use this argument. They might use this 4-point analysis to talk about just the selflessness of persons, but this is not what they mean by emptiness. It's completely different. They're talking about, in the way that one goes about meditating on what the Chittamatra or mind-only school means by emptiness is a little bit different than this. Emptiness to that school just means that, or just means that there is a sense of external reality, and that sense of external reality is false, that there is an emptiness, a lack of a difference between the consciousness and the objects that perceive them, the way that our mind perceives it to be. That is, we say in philosophical language, we would say they're empty of form, and form-realizing consciousness are empty of being different substances. Sounds daunting. Like, say, a form, visual form, and the form-realizing consciousness, say the visual form in this case, they are empty, that means they're devoid, of being different substances. Right now, it seems like this consciousness is quite different than this external object. But that's a different question. That's not being called into question here at all right now. That's one of the lower philosophical schools. We're talking here, although the presentation, as Rinpoche said, this is the beginning presentation, very simple to understand, the 4-point analysis. This is still referring to emptiness from the most subtle point of view, from the Prasangika, Madhyamaka school, Madhyamika point of view. Okay, yeah.
We were going over those 4 essential points that you just began.
Yes.
I have 2, and the last one, I only got 2.
Okay.
And the last one seems to encompass 3 parts or something. I have one is the object of negation, and the others I have a notice says establishing the pervasion.
Okay, so here the 4 points, they're actually in the text, but maybe they're phrased in different words than we're using in the class. One is recognizing, or you could say identifying, the object of negation. That's the first essential point. You might spend a lot of time doing that. That's the most important thing. You might think, oh, that's easy, I. The second point is, you might say, establishing the pervasion. What that means is establishing a certain kind of logical necessity that if such an I existed, it would have to be either truly one with your aggregates or truly different from your aggregates. We could say that such an I would have to be either identical with your aggregates, a truly existent I would have to be identical with your aggregates, or different from your aggregates. You might say, well, where did that come from? Where did they pull that out of, right? Why did they choose that thing? Why didn't they say it should be either green or yellow or something else, Do you know why? Because we learn at other times in Buddhist philosophy, there is a concept called singleness and otherness, or identity and otherness. If any two things exist, okay, let's say wristwatch and book. If two things exist, they have to either be identical or different. Are wristwatch and book identical or different? Pardon? No, they're different. They're different. They're not. There's not how you look at it in this case. They're
Both sitting on the table.
no. We're talking about its phenomena to a consciousness that is that when we talk about phenomena, are two things identical? Well, let me ask you: are libro and book identical or different? What do you think, John? Or what's the German word? Buch. Handbuch. Are libro and book identical or different? They're different because they're terminologically different. They're still different. They're not identical. Book, only thing that's identical with book is book. Wristwatch is different than book. So you might say, well, big deal, You just told me something that's that even my dog understands, right? Maybe not Linda's dog, I'm not sure. Most dogs understand. But in this context, this can be very useful because if we take two different things now, we take the I, the sense of I that is appearing to us, that we've recognized, the first point, and we try to compare it with the basis of designation of the person, the five aggregates. The five aggregates. You know the five skandhas? The body, the feelings, the discriminations, the compositional factors, the other mental factors, and consciousness. Those five elements, if you take apart the person, there's nothing left when you take all those away. So somehow the person has to be comprised of those. You compare the self, the sense of self, truly existent sense of self, with the five aggregates. And then you make the statement. Because the five aggregates exist conventionally, we have some feeling. If the self exists, if the truly existent self exists, it either has to be identical with the aggregates or different from the aggregates. Okay? So it's that is the second point. That's called establishing the pervasion. And that takes some time to logically to come to some certainty of in your own mind. The third and fourth points, it said that maybe even in one meditative session one might establish the third and fourth points. But to our minds there might be many, many doubts that arise because we haven't identified have not identified the object of negation, nor have we established this certainty, this pervasion, that it has to be, a self would have to be either identical or different from the aggregates. The third point is determining that it is not the same as the aggregates. It is not identical to the aggregates, this self. Rinpoche will be talking about that either today or next lesson. And the fourth point is determining that it's not different than the aggregates. Or you could have different order. You could say not different or it's not same. It doesn't have to be in that order. Once you've recognized the object of negation and you've determined that it either has to be, that object of negation, if it existed, would have to either be identical. If it existed, it would have to be either identical with the aggregates or different. Then you see it's not identical with the aggregates. And it's not different from the aggregates. Once you realize that, you bring about some recognition of that. Then, because of this pervasion, you have to go back in your mind. Well, if it did exist, it would have to be either this or this. It's not this, it's not this. But if it did exist, it would have to be. Therefore, it doesn't exist. The truly existent I is non-existent, merely negated. That is the sense of emptiness that's being referred to here. as the book says, simple negation, or as in a lot of translators in recent years have called a non-affirming negation, a negation that simply refutes the existence of that and doesn't say there's something else there. What is your name back there that asked the question, Machira? Pat, the truly existent Pat does not exist. Say if Pat was meditating on selflessness, she would be thinking I, the I that seems to be appearing from its own side, seems to be existing from its own side, does not exist at all like that. And at that moment, what would appear to your mind, as is the text says, is a space-like emptiness, a mere vacuity. That would be a apprehension of emptiness at that moment, when one had some certainty of that. Let's just meditate again before we finish for just a couple minutes. See if you can recognize, again, try to recognize the object of negation. Not the intellectually formed sense of the self. You know, that I am Steve the acupuncturist. I am John the author. I am Linda the mother. Whatever. Not like that, but the sense of I, which is the appearance of I, to that innate grasping, the subtlemost ignorance. Remind yourself, as Lama Tsongkhapa said, skillful, just to compare it with what the Buddha said does exist. Pat is just a name designated to my 5 aggregates. That's the only existence I, Pat, have. Compare that with the sense of I that is not just a name, seems to be existing from its own side. The grasping at this as true is the itch that we can remove. This is the cause of all of our problems, the belief in this I. It seems very real, very vibrant. Then dedicate the energy that we've created, the virtue we've created this morning, this afternoon, that we might, for the benefit of all living beings, this lifetime, have an insight into emptiness, overcome our ego, thereby have the courage to develop great altruistic mind to work for the welfare of all sentient beings, because there is no truly existent I.